Welcome to our ACOS webinar series. Our goal here at ACOS is to network and educate the international accountant in the USA. Today, we're going to present a session on the state of the market. A couple of housekeeping issues before we get started. Please submit your questions in the question pane that's in your control panel. We'll address what questions we can during each section of our webinar, but any questions that we're not addressing, we will address after the webinar. Also, make sure you download the handout that's in your control panel as well. So you can follow along. We are recording this session, so for those of you that potentially can't stay on for the whole time or want to refer back to any of the materials, you'll be able to do so once we submit the recording out. Do keep your follow-up email to this webinar as a record of your attendance. Sometimes these sessions do qualify for your accounting body's professional education, so please keep a hold of that in case you need to use that. Use this for proof of attendance. I'm going to introduce myself and then introduce the rest of our presenters, and then we'll hand the mic over to Connell to get on with the questions. So I am Sasha Carlson. I'm the Executive Director of ACOS, and I'm very happy to see so many people on the line. With us today, we've got Melissa Shipman, a CPA who's a Vice President of Managed Business Services at Robert Half Management Resources, and Mike Weiss, who is the Senior Manager of Group Public Relations, also with Robert Half. Our moderator today is Connell McGonigal. He's got all sorts of titles with us. So he's our New York chapter president, he's our board secretary, and he's our Home Institute rep for the Irish Institute. So Connell's going to be taking us through our session today. Connell, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you, Sasha. Welcome, everyone. So today we're going to focus on 5 main topics. The first one is an overview of the state of the market on employment, unemployment, and salaries. The second one is because ACOS has so many members across the USA, with about 9,000 members, we'd like to dive a bit deeper and look at 5 different regions across the USA and what the job market trends are there. The third focus area is on what's happening, what are the underlying business trends, and that links on to the fourth area. So based on those trends that we're seeing, how do we as accountants have to adapt and respond? So the fourth area is talking about advancing our career. It goes into networking, branding, and how we can develop and further build our business relationships. The last topic is to discuss the current status of the mutual recognition agreements. We're all international accountants. We've all become CAs overseas, and now we're in the US, and a lot of members always ask us about what's the current status. Do I get recognition, or is there a pathway for me to become a CPA in the USA? So let's get started. I think it'll be very interesting. Mike, could you please give us an overview of the current job market?
Sure, thanks, Connell. Hi, everybody. So companies are hiring to support business growth. They're also hiring to meet compliance demands, and that includes the new revenue recognition and lease accounting standards. And companies also are hiring in response to digital transformation efforts, which no doubt many companies are seeing today. The issue in the market is that hiring is difficult for employers. Unemployment rates in accounting and finance often are below the national average, and many employers are finding their talent shortages when they are in the midst of their recruiting processes. The good news is, we'll talk about later for professionals, is that it's creating competition for top candidates and in many cases driving salaries higher. One of the ways that we're seeing companies respond to this hiring environment is by adopting multiple staffing strategies. So for example, in addition to full-time hiring, they're also working with interim professionals, consultants, and managed services providers. And oftentimes they'll bring in these external resources for major projects and initiatives that require specialized expertise. Companies also are loosening their hiring requirements. So instead of looking for a candidate who checks off every hiring criteria, employers are looking for applicants who meet, say, 70% of the criteria, but will fit the organizational culture, and they can be trained on the remaining areas.
Like you mentioned that a lot of companies are actively working on digital transformation efforts within their finance functions. How are you seeing, what's the impact of these initiatives on the hiring function?
Sure, we looked into this. We do a research project with the Financial Executives Research Foundation, and we asked companies about their hiring plans related to digital transformation. And what we found is that most companies are maintaining their staffing levels. As you can see on the slide, it's about 6 and 10. But of the companies that are making changes, financial leaders at those companies said financial leaders at those companies were more than 3 times likely to say that they're adding staff due to digital transformation than reducing staff. And so only 3% of companies reported that they're reducing staff levels. And companies are implementing these initiatives. They're automating processes when possible, and that's allowing them to free their staff to focus on higher value work. So they're automating the routine processes, and they're giving higher value work, more strategic work to their accounting and finance teams. And in general, businesses need accountants who have systems expertise and can analyze the immense volume of data available, and then turn their analyses into actual recommendations that they can present to diverse audiences, including audiences with non-financial backgrounds.
We start to explore some of the major regional markets across the USA, please. So, for example, could you start with Chicago, Mike, and tell us what trends you're seeing there, please?
Sure, absolutely. And Chicago demand's particularly high for staff accountants, and there typically are not enough candidates to fill the open jobs. Companies in Chicago, similar to what we talked about earlier, but they're responding to this competitive hiring environment by becoming more creative in their hiring efforts. And as we mentioned, from a national perspective, companies in Chicago often are more open to hiring and training a candidate who has great potential instead of waiting for the perfect hire, which typically is an unreasonable and not a feasible strategy. Hot industries in Chicago for accounting and finance professionals include real estate, nonprofit, professional services, and financial services. And regulatory changes and new accounting standards also are driving hiring in the market. Right. And as we turn to Houston, professionals are confident enough in the job market right now that they're willing to leave their jobs even if they don't have another one lined up. That confidence is due to the tight hiring market. So it's a good employment market. And as we talked about, employers often are facing recruiting challenges and competition for top candidates. And because of that, many candidates are receiving competing job offers from employers. And not surprisingly, then those top candidates typically are able to leave the market and jump on a new opportunity pretty quickly. As part of this, we're seeing more negotiations for salary and benefits compared to previous years, and companies now are also offering sign-on bonuses to top candidates. As we move to New York, there's a lot of competition to hire accounting and finance professionals, again, mirroring the larger environment. But there's particular competition for senior accountants, financial analysts, auditors, and compliance specialists. And within compliance, companies in particular seek those who have anti-money laundering expertise. So the hiring environment is combining with an influx of startup companies, the strong financial services industry in New York, and this competition for top performers to drive up salaries there. All right, moving on to San Francisco and the Bay Area. Again, hiring environment there is a hot one. Employers face challenges finding skilled professionals. The hot positions that companies are often hiring for here, I say here being based in the Bay Area, those positions include staff and senior accountants, business systems analysts, and financial analysts. And industries of note driving hiring include high tech, commercial construction, consumer product goods, professional services, and the nonprofit sector. And when hiring, companies often look for professionals who are experts in the new revenue recognition standard and have experience with SEC financial reporting. Then the last city we're calling out here is Seattle, and unemployment in Seattle remains low, and there's hiring happening at all levels in accounting and finance, and hiring is also happening across industries, perhaps most notably in technology, construction, and also real estate. Candidates here often have the upper hand in the hiring process, and companies are responding by shortening their hiring process, and then they're also turning the recruiting into more of a sales pitch effort to woo top candidates.
I see that in practice. A lot of the ACOS members relocate from one of these exciting cities to another over time. What job search advice could you give to accountants looking to relocate to one of these cities, please?
Sure, Connell, and hi, everyone. The first thing I would say is check with your current employer and see what opportunities may be there. Really, employers in this market and what Mike was referring to in the tight market, they want to retain their top talent, and many times they'll be willing to reassign you or relocate you to one of the other cities that the company has a presence in. The other thing you could do is work with a recruiter. Recruiting firms really know those local markets in and out. They know the salaries. They're very familiar with what's going on and also company culture in those areas. And a firm such as the one I work for at Robert Half can be a really good partner for you during your job search. And the last thing I would say is so many of us find jobs through networking. And, you know, just like your ACOS here, this is such a great platform. But the more you can network, let people know that you're interested in making a transition, that's really going to help you leapfrog your job search. And then the last thing I would say is, you know, we looked at these cities and, you know, the first thing I could say is you could rush to Seattle and San Francisco and find a job tomorrow, but make sure you research the salary and housing trends. You know, you want to know what you're getting into when you move into those cities. They're struggling to fill the roles, but at the same time, there's higher costs to live in those areas, as you can imagine, cost of living.
Alyssa, could you describe some of the specific business trends and issues that you're noticing and the impact that they're having on the accounting market, please?
Sure, Connell. I've had the opportunity to travel around the globe and mainly around the U.S. and speak with a lot of our clients. And I would say, if I had to put a percentage on it, about 60% of our clients are either considering a merger or acquisition, going through one, or they have been through one. And so these types of events are very, very common right now. We talked about digital transformation. That is as leading event in companies right now. And then just the industry disruption. Companies are trying to keep up with the competition and keep up with things as they're moving and changing. And we've got a lot of growth at these companies with the market the way it is. And, you know, any time you're upgrading your ERP and software systems, there's going to be lots of events happening around that. And so companies really are going through a lot of change. And these changes can take on a variety of different forms. Really, what the overarching challenge is when I talk to CFOs and other finance executives, it's number one, they need the skills for these events. And number two, they need the scale. These changes are creating a sudden need for very different types of expertise than maybe they have in-house. So such as an ERP implementation, you're going to need finance professionals with technology and change management skills. You may not have that on your team. An acquisition is going to require expertise around integration. Digital transformations may require new roles such as a data scientist or robotic developers. And the second challenge for CFOs is managing the greater magnitude and with growing frequency. They need to be able to scale their teams up and down. And how do you do that quickly and effectively? And they cannot always do that with perm-placed teams. And so an interesting fact that we've researched is by 2027, they're saying 75% of the companies in the S&P 500, will be companies that are not on the index today. So lots of change going on. The other interesting fact is by 2030, the year 2030, 10% of the largest companies in the U.S. will be virtual, with less than 10% of their workers working out of an office at any given time. So you can really tell with this changing environment and disruption, there's a lot of opportunities for us in the accounting finance space and lots of demand in that space.
Thank you very much. We're receiving interesting questions from the participants on the webinar. And what I want to do is park them for a few minutes because we're going to come to slides that will be relevant, and then we'll ask the questions and get your advice on those. So if we could move forward to the next. So could you tell us at what career stage should an accountant or a finance professional consider either interim or consulting work? One question we've received from the audience is, the person is 59, would they be a good candidate for a consulting role?
Absolutely, Connell. I would say no matter what stage you're in your career, the time is now. We'll talk a little bit more about how this transition of the workforce is happening, but the use of contractors and contingent employees, flexible staffing is really surging. It's now got its own catchphrase. If any of you've heard of the gig economy, today slightly more than 1/3 of the U.S. workforce really is freelancers and consultants. And by 2027, they're projecting the majority of the workforce will be freelancing. So many companies are striving to establish and manage all these more complex type talent systems. It's just not the traditional workforce of the past. And really, to answer the question from the audience, late 50s, any time is great. This flexible work is going to give you the ability to expand on your skill set and be even more valuable to companies.
Melissa, could you tell us, why do companies work with external resources such as consultants, managed service providers, and outsourcers? What's behind that trend?
Sure. Yes, Connell, as we talked about, this is really the trend and the direction we're seeing companies moving. I think everybody on the phone, if you're working in accounting now, you can relate to that companies have very lean departments, and there's not a lot of extra bandwidth to take on projects. And also the skills that they're requiring in their organizations are evolving rapidly. So it's getting really challenging to fill roles whose specifications are going to change year over year. So good example, the contractor and flexible staffing model is so prevalent. Actually, the Google parent Alphabet has roughly the same number of third-party contractors as they do full-time employees. They've really embraced this type of workforce. It also gives you access to specialized expertise. So thinking back to the one-time events that I talked about previously, companies are needing very specific skill sets just for an interim period, and they much prefer to bring that in on demand and partner with somebody that they can scale up and down with. It's becoming very valuable to clients.
Melissa, how can accountants benefit from working with a recruiter? And what advice would you give us for working with a recruiter, please?
Sure. A recruiter can actually be your eyes, your ears, your advocate through a job search. A lot of times they know about job opportunities that are out there before they're even publicized, because they're working with companies directly and talking with them about upcoming openings. They also know the local market, and I would not, understate that at all. The trends, you can really dive in a lot of times with your recruiter and ask them about a culture. That's important to us when we go to work. We don't just go to work, as you know, for a paycheck. And so you want to understand what that company's about. And so a local recruiter can really give you insight there. And you can work with them whether you want to, as we've been discussing, the consulting and interim work, but you can also work with a recruiter, just looking for your new full-time job or career. The one thing I would say, if you're looking at recruiting firms, make sure you're getting one that specializes in accounting and finance, which marries up to your background. And then again, as we talked before, networking is always great. I've been so encouraged by the way people enjoy helping each other. And I think you'll be surprised when you tap into your network and let them know you're interested in making a move. They want to help you. And a lot of times you can find that next job through your network.
We received a question asking, what would my resume need to include to be hired in a business system analyst role in San Francisco? I assume a local recruiter could help with that?
Absolutely, Connell, and that would be where I would start. And you could reach out to, again, a firm like ours that has a place in San Francisco or one of the local offices. But that recruiter is going to partner with you, and they're going to want to help you get placed. So the first thing we do at a recruiting firm is we start working on that resume and saying, okay, tell me more about what you've done. And a lot of times I find that people undersell themselves. They really could put more in there about a project that was very successful, and maybe they just didn't put that in there. Maybe they just described, where they worked. So I'd say reach out to a recruiter, and that'd be your best connection there.
There's another question here from the audience to get your advice on who are the big players in managed services in the accounting finance field.
So really interesting question. Love it. In what I do with, it's a blend of Robert Half staffing side of the business and our wholly owned subsidiary, which is Protiviti, which is a true management consulting firm. So when you think about that dynamic, we're able to go in with a blend of true consulting and staffing to partner with companies in a unique way. And so in the finance and accounting space, we're seeing a lot of, people or companies that will say, help us in our shared service area. That's probably number one. Either help us build it out and continue to run it, or, give it back to us after you've helped build it out. So that's a very common thing. The other thing I would say is, as you look at things like payables, things that are very easily automated and that are transactional in nature, having a provider come in and streamline the process, get the process really efficient, and then turn it back to that client or manage it. Those are things that can be tackled through a managed service platform in finance and accounting.
One member of the audience has mentioned to me that they have led 3 ERP implementations over their career, and I think that leads us nicely on to the next slide. Could you talk us through and give us your advice on what skill sets are required and what are in demand, please?
Sure, absolutely. We talked a little bit about the digital transformation and what's going on with automation. I mean, essentially, routine and predictable activities are starting to be incorporated into the ERP. You've got, robotics coming online. You've got workflow and reporting systems. So the clients and CFOs are really under pressures to transform their accounting staff to be more value add. So when you look across, the types of roles, you're really looking to add value, not just do a job and check the box, right? They're being asked to work with the business units and be more efficient and effective in their role. So the companies are really saying, we want to be able to leverage technology and data. So having led, a couple of ERP implementations makes you a very, very a nice resource for that company. Also, with so many events happening quickly and frequently, accountants need to be versatile and proactive in what they do. So I'd say as many different types of skill sets as you can gain, different ERPs, different technologies, different industries, it makes you so valuable to different companies and clients. But what I would like to say, some of you in the audience may say, well, what if I'm not trained in RPA or automation? What do I do? I would say that there's good news. So the good news is these new capabilities are very easily mastered. And so don't let RPA intimidate you. It's something that you can very easily add into your skill sets and what you bring to a client or a company.
We received another great question here saying that, I'm going to read it out. I'm a finance professional with roughly half my career in finance roles, FP&A audit, but the other half, more recent, has been in risk management, credit risk, and operational risk. I'm looking to get back into finance but find it difficult, as my more recent experience is not in finance. I believe I've developed skills from risk management that would be really useful in finance. What guidance and advice would you give us?
Well, and I don't want to, repeat myself over and over, but I'd say number one, make sure you work with a recruiter. And if you're not happy, or maybe you just haven't connected with that one, reach out to a different company. They can be really useful in communicating that great skill set that you just described back to maybe a company that they know very well. And they say, hey, trust me, you need to talk to this person. They've got a very dynamic skill set. The second thing I would say, if you haven't considered it or looked into it, think about a career, or at least this time in your life, doing consulting. I did that myself. I'd been a controller. I'm a CPA, but I found that I was really able to broaden my skill set by stepping into consulting and working on different projects. And then I was able to bring even more to the table. And when we're talking about this trend where companies are needing to scale up and to partner with somebody for events, there's more and more opportunity around the project type work. So whatever market you're in, see who the players are in consulting and see if you can tap in there. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Sasha, can I bring you in here to get your advice? Are there any additional future skills that you think we should focus on?
Hey, thanks, Connell. I think I'm going to take a bit of a different tack from what Melissa has been discussing about specific skills, and kind of highlight some of the great strengths that we get from our chartered qualification. So as Mike and Melissa have already discussed, there's a ton of opportunities for professional accountants with regards to the digital transformation. We can use technology to drive better analysis, decision-making, and risk management. We use the technology to highlight anomalies, and that's where our competencies really drive the value for our business, because we can provide strategy and professional judgment to manage these risks. And the way we can get to those skills is really relying on where we came from through our qualification. And that actually brings us forward where we know already how to develop a range of multidisciplinary skills. We need to keep up with those skills by being committed to lifelong learning, as our institutes continue to mention to us, and to share our knowledge. We should understand our stakeholder needs and requirements as they relate to the business. Obviously, we need to embrace the rapid change in our world, understand and actually influence the use of technology, understand the needs of our clients, and embrace the diversity of people, skills, culture, and backgrounds of those around you. And then, I'll move to the next bit, which is the utilize the soft skills that we possess, which are really integral to leading: leadership, critical thinking, communication, emotional intelligence. And above all, we need to do this within the mantle of ethics and integrity. So I really feel like our greatest skills will be coming from our qualification, which gives us the ability to be adaptable and agile in this transformative time. Don't hold back from embracing innovations. Learn about the technology, as Melissa has mentioned. Understand how the disruptive factors can be managed through change and your own strong leadership. Again, focus on your critical thinking and problem-solving skills, and just know that these skills have never been more important and will propel you to success no matter what the marketplace changes into. And really, as international accounting professionals, we are really well placed to keep abreast of this changing environment because of our technical leadership and ethical competencies.
I've an interesting question here. I'm going to read it out and then I'm going to bring you in. The question is, what are you seeing as skill sets needed for CFO roles? Are the skills that are currently in demand, analytics, implementation, integration, etc., sufficient? Or is a traditional controller type role, for example, full cycle accounting, still a common route? So the question is a broader question: why are soft skills in demand? Are they must-haves if your ambition is to become a CFO or a different role?
Yes, I would absolutely underscore what Sasha was saying and say the soft skills are a must-have. I mean, when you look at a CFO role, many times they come from operations even, but they have a dynamic ability to lead teams, to communicate, if they're public, working with the board of directors, that type of thing. That soft skills are probably the primary thing you need in that type of seat, but it's really got to be a large part of what all of us as accountants bring to the table. It used to be just what we could do technically, but soft skills are what's going to help you really advance your career, and they need to be front and center. The companies really want us to play more of a strategic role and serve as a business advisor. And without an ability to communicate, serve as a leader, be collaborative, we as accountants cannot really provide the employers what the value they need and what they're looking for. So I would say, number one, if you need to work on those skills, and the good news is that's something that can be improved. A lot of us as accountants, kind of get in our day-to-day and don't want to work on that because it may be a little uncomfortable, right? But I would challenge you to put yourselves in situations where you need to present some material or you need to get outside your comfort zone and network a little bit. That'll help you with those soft skills.
Sasha, could we get your advice on the different ways that the home institutes or our member accounting bodies overseas are reacting or showing leadership in relation to these trends?
Sure, Connell. I'm going to focus most of my comments on our major founding accounting institutes and bodies, which comprise our membership. But certainly, you should look at your own any other members that are or any other audience members that are on. Go back to your original accounting bodies and see what they offer. So many of our home institutes have complemented the already rigorous and globally relevant qualification by offering additional designations and training opportunities. For instance, ICAW offers the business and finance professional designation, demonstrating the knowledge and skills and experience in business and finance. Chartered Accountants Ireland will be offering a new advanced certificate in US GAAP and a certificate in cybersecurity and data incident management. ICAS has also partnered with Chartered Accountants Ireland to offer joint diplomas in several specialist areas such as IFRS, finance, and others. Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand offers a business valuation specialization as well as a forensic accounting specialty. CPA Canada's qualification program is actually designed around a whole competency map, which enables a variety of specialties within the designation itself. They also offer a corporate finance qualification for those who work with financial clients and investors. CICA offers training on data analytics for assurance and certificates in IFRS. So, as I mentioned, your professional accounting body is a great resource to support you. Contact them for more information and see how they can continue to help you grow with the skills that you need to be relevant.
There's a question here from the audience to get the panel's advice on how an accountant would go about gaining robotic process automation skills. Any advice or tips? Is it easy? Are there courses out there? Thank you.
Yes. Happy to answer that. You can actually, it costs a little bit, but you can go through companies like Blue Prism, UiPath. They provide the RPA software, and they also have very specific training around that, and they are selling the software, so they certainly don't mind. They actually encourage training around implementing and working with RPA. So that's something you could do online, and tap into those types of companies. And then there's third-party companies that can do the online courses, such as we take for our specializations, and that would be a really good start.
Melissa, based on the skills we discussed in the last few minutes, could you advise us on what types of roles are in demand in the market these days?
Sure. I thought I would share this with you. I actually got this email 2 days ago from one of my clients in Houston, and I think it's so timely. I wanted to share it with the group. I think this is a good place to share it. This is his quote: "Melissa, I have an immediate and somewhat desperate request. We need people," and he's got that in caps. "When you combine the demands of technology today with today's job market and demand for services, people are at a premium, and we have been struggling to fill all of our hiring needs. And at the same time, we've recently lost a few people in key areas of our company. We're working it as hard as we can, but we really need help gaining traction." And he went on to ask for my help to get him plugged in to finding people. But I think based on my client's quote, I feel we can really confidently say that accounting skill sets that incorporate the ability to work within different ERPs, as we mentioned earlier, is invaluable. But looking at the landscape in the current market, anyone with strong accounting skills should be able to find a job quickly and confidently.
Mike, I want to bring you in here. Could you describe what compensation trends that you're seeing in the current market, please?
Sure, thanks, Donald. So in many cases, salaries are rising. It goes back to the competitive hiring market and retention issues that we've talked about today. And companies to attract strong accountants and financial professionals, and then to keep them on board once they're there, are upping their salaries that they're offering, and they're also enhancing their benefits packages. One of the things that we've noticed in the market is, so we take a look here at what employers most commonly offer from benefits, perks, and incentives perspectives. But what we found in our salary guide research is that these don't always align with what workers want most. For example, many workers are looking for telecommuting opportunities, but that's not offered as commonly. So what this suggests is that there may be room for candidates to negotiate for additional benefits or perks that they want, in addition to negotiating for a higher salary. We are seeing companies oftentimes being more flexible in negotiations and then what they're willing to offer in their full compensation packages.
Melissa, what negotiation tips can you offer to our audience listeners if they're hoping to secure a higher salary?
Sure. The first thing I would say is know what you're worth. Research whatever resources you can get your hands on, such as the Robert Half Salary Guide, and I believe we've got that as a link after the webinar here. And just know what you can expect and be able to counter if you need to by doing your research first. And then I would say be confident. When you're speaking with an employer, they can read your body language. They can tell if you're not sure of yourself. So be very confident and do that research ahead of time so you can stand firm in what you'll take. Also, the third thing I'd say is your resume won't win you the job, but it can absolutely lose the job for you if you haven't really made sure it's flowing through your work experience and really reflecting who you are and the skill sets you have. So back to what we said earlier, trying to get a respected third party and preferably a recruiter to help you hone in on that resume is always helpful.
So what about the situation where an accountant is in a great position and they have to decide or choose between two different job offers?
Right. I mean, one of the things to do is obviously look at both opportunities, look at the compensation and look at the big picture, right? And also look at maybe not the here and now, but what's down the road. What advancement potential is this particular job going to give me? Or am I going to be kind of in a dead end if I take this job? And then, as I mentioned before, what about corporate culture? What culture may you fit into better? So those are some of the things you can take into consideration. But I'd say in the end, go with your gut. That's usually we know. We just feel more drawn to maybe a connection with that hiring manager, that company. It just feels better. And so don't overanalyze it. After you've really given it a good view, go with your feeling there.
Melissa, with retention a concern for a lot of companies, are you seeing firms offer their employees in the finance function who quit more money to stay, a counteroffer?
Yes, it's very common, and as you can imagine, in the job market like we have right now, it's really flattering, and all of us, appreciate it when somebody says, I value you, and I value you so much, I want to give you more. But if you think about it this way, it shouldn't take you leaving for your employer to see your worth. They should have known that to begin with. And in addition, typically that hike that you're going to get in salary, it's going to be a Band-Aid to something else. It's not really going to take care of the issues that made you want to leave in the first place. And I'd also say, if you've already given the new company your word and accepted an offer, you really need to move forward. And that goes back to our integrity, as accountants, we want to maintain that.
A great question here from the audience. It's asking, if you want to move up a level, for example, from senior to manager, when moving job, what should you do to prove you deserve the managerial role? Get the panel's advice on that, please.
Sure. I'll weigh in with one thing that I've found very powerful. If you can quantify the return on investment. So think about some of the things you've done in that more junior role. Were you able to save the company money? Were you able to reduce the days of closing? What's something that you did that made that company better? And try to quantify that in your resume and as you're speaking with your new future employer. And what they'll see is that you have done and brought value to the company at a level that's possibly higher than when you left that company.
There's a few questions here about the value of the Chartered Accountant designation, and we're going to get to that in a few minutes because we've prepared slides on that. But I have another question here to get the panel's advice on. The question is, what's the status with ageism? I'm 58 and seeking employment 2 years ago. I found that experience to be a challenge.
Yes, and I think that's a great question, and kind of goes hand in hand with what I was speaking about before. And I can relate. I remember when my own father was in a job search, and he was later in his career, and he was really struggling and finding it to be a hard time. But I can tell you from being in the consulting world, such as I am, we find people at that age in their life very, very valuable because of what they can bring into consulting. And I would just, put it out there again. If you hadn't considered that, you might consider that, because you're able to bring so many broad, different experiences and skill sets in. And when you're on consulting projects, you're getting different things thrown at you every day. It's not a typical job. And so somebody like yourself can be very valuable in the consulting world. So I would just encourage you, there's a lot of, in the major cities, a lot of local, what we call boutique consulting firms. Those are good places to start and look at that. I mean, Robert Half also has in most of the major cities, recruiters who can talk to you about a career in consulting.
Sasha, could you talk about the value proposition of the Chartered Accountant designation, please?
Sure. I'm going to focus most of my comments on the chartered designation because our members are primarily chartered accountants or chartered professional accountants from Canada. And we're going to talk about this sort of with a view to using these the qualification as really your brand to sell yourself in the U.S. market to be marketable in the industries here. So those of us that have gone through this, we all know the qualification process for obtaining the CA or CPA in Canada provides this huge breadth and depth of knowledge. It's a really rigorous training process. Not only do we learn all the technical accounting topics, but we also focus on management issues and leadership, and ethics, and strategy. So decision making and analysis under all of this knowledge are really the keystones of our professions. And we're much more than accountants. We're really business leaders, and our designation really enables us to lead in every part of the economy and at every level. So, in industry, we're trusted decision makers with skills that enable us to manage risk, identify new opportunities, as well as to provide that backbone of corporate responsibility and accountability. In public practice, we provide advisory roles in all sorts of areas: startups, valuations, acquisitions, and of course, assurance for both external and internal audits. In government, not-for-profits and academia, we are relied on for our stewardship. So really, our experience and training enables us to be highly mobile and relevant and successful really all over the world. We really need to go back to these fundamentals, values of our qualification to really bring this out to potential employers to say, look, we may not have a CPA, for instance, which we'll get to in a minute, but we have all of these strengths that come from the qualification and training process itself.
Sasha, where do the CAs and the CPA Canada members typically work?
Well, as I said, they're really in all industries. We've got, looking at the limited data that we have, it looks like we've got about 30% of our membership really working within public practice, and then the rest are distributed all over all the other industries that we have in this country, and really across many roles. That's actually one good thing to point out at this point, and we'll get back to it when we talk about networking. But if you're looking to continue to be successful, here in the U.S., really access your network, find people who, who are in the industry you want to work for, and talk to them and see if they can help you out. That, as I said, we've got members and really professional accountants all through the whole business sector here. So they're using that network to leverage these connections will really help promote you through your career.
So we have a question from the audience here asking, what should complement one's CA qualification for you to be more attractive to employers in the USA? So I think that leads us on to your next overview of what you see as the branding and the value that chartered accountants can bring to companies.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really great question. Before I go through my little list of branding, I think we can also say, anything else to complement this, the chartered qualification is a lot of things that Melissa's mentioned about getting some additional training. As I mentioned, looking to your founding member institutes or accounting bodies to see what additional training and qualifications they may offer can really keep you up to date on what's needed in the current environment. In terms of our own branding, I think, as I mentioned, our core values are really integral to our success here in the marketplace in the US and obviously all over the world. But we're built on these pillars of integrity, confidentiality, objectivity, and a commitment to protect the public. I think we bring these values to our ability to analyze data, to make reasoned decision making using critical thinking, professional judgment, and ethical leadership. I think these core values entrenched through our qualification and experience, that's the stuff that enables us to really reinvent ourselves to be leaders and influencers in this ever-changing global market, let alone the US market. So I think we really need to focus on these traits and values as being essential to our brand. We are leaders with technical skills. We've got a huge gamut of business knowledge that really can adapt to any industry. We can draw from our strengths from the qualification process and really our commitment to learning to be assets in this changing employment and business market. And really our additional international experience also allows us to understand the diversity of companies, cultures, peoples, regulations, and business issues that are huge differentiators in the marketplace. And I'll get to the importance of networking in a minute, but that's another part of how we are going to brand ourselves.
Melissa, how can chartered accountants position the CA, such as in their resume or when they're doing job interviews or when they're working with recruiters and hiring managers?
Sure, Connell. I'll underscore what Sasha's talked a little bit about, the value. So try to talk about the value you bring through that designation. And another thing that might help is if you could develop kind of what I'd call an elevator pitch, just a brief 2-sentence, 3 sentences of what is a CA, what are the requirements for that certification. I mean, a lot of the people you're talking to in the U.S. may not understand, what that is and what that qualification really brings to the table. So I think that'll help you demonstrate how your skill sets are equivalent to a CPA. And then just show how you continue learning, how you continue with professional education and try to stay at the forefront of the profession.
One member of the audience asked, how should chartered accountants position their CA when an employer asks for a CPA?
Sure. So I'd start number one by making sure so many employers, like I mentioned, don't really understand that CA designation. So, a short explanation around that and how it's more equivalent to a CPA. And then the second thing I'd say is make sure the employer really needs a CPA. You might dive in with a question like, are you looking for me to have GAAP experience, US GAAP? That may not be what they need. They're just throwing it out there because everybody in the US is more familiar with CPAs, right? They may find that an IFRS designation may be sufficient, that if you know that type of accounting, then you're fine. But, if you do understand GAAP and have been trained in that, I would also say add that to your resume, and that helps you, stand against the CPA designation much more strongly.
Thank you. Well, one member of the audience is asking, will we provide a copy of the slides? And I think the answer is yes after the webinar. Sasha, could we move on and could you tell us about the benefits of networking, please?
Yes, this is my favorite topic, but let me just jump in for a second and address the question about the slides. The slides are actually already available as handouts on this webinar, so just take a look on your control pane and you can grab it from there. If you can't find it, I'll be happy to send it over. Okay, so networking. Networking is truly a really important aspect of any professional's career. Engaging with your network allows you to share your experiences, discover new opportunities, but most importantly, stay connected with your profession. So for those of us who call the US our new home, this network is even more important. So this is going to be my big plug for ACOS. ACOS provides a huge forum for our members to be networked, to be educated, and to be connected to other members from their home institutes or accounting bodies, but also to thousands of other international accountants in the US. We bring a unique perspective excuse me, of having been trained, worked, and lived a life in at least one other country. But all of us are now here working in the same profession in the US. This unique combination really builds a trusted and important connection which supports the membership and the profession at large. So some specific benefits of membership with ACOS. We offer access to a member-only forum with direct connections actually to member industry specialists and other high-profile members. A huge online network through our LinkedIn group. We've now got almost 3,200 direct contacts, which allows for connections with, over 150,000 other international accountants around the world. Obviously, we offer great networking opportunities, which, further career development. This is actually one of the most tangible benefits of membership. It's having access to these senior and highly successful members who've been able to promote their own international brand in the US market. So get engaged with your local local ACOS network and find us online to leverage this connection. As we mentioned earlier, our members work in all sectors, so you can find somebody in yours. As Melissa had mentioned, if you need help developing your elevator pitch, use these members to help you develop it, get them to help you with a job search or just general advice. If you haven't actually been an active participant in our events, get involved. If you need some help with that, come talk to me or any one of our board. We offer a fabulous platform to improve your personal brand. And in fact, we're starting a new initiative that Connell will be leading, which is offering digital badges for our members. This is going to be a huge differentiator, especially in the international accounting market here in the US. So we'll get you more information on that as we come forward. We can facilitate a job search. We can provide, mentorship services for those of you looking to get some more experience in the US. And obviously, any questions you have about reciprocity and immigration or visa issues, we can help get you connected to the people that will give you the information that you need. So to really take advantage of this ACOS network. So if any of our audience is already not part of our network, please contact me. Join our ACOS LinkedIn group. This is where we put forward all of the updates from the profession, what's going on in our networks, with it, whether it's in-person events or these great webinar series, or you can come join us directly at acos.org.
Actually, you mentioned reciprocity, and a lot of members and audience members are asking about this. Could we move on to the status? Could you give us a status update on the mutual recognition agreements, please?
You got it. Yep, absolutely. So we've been discussing the value of the charter designation and the skills that we need to stay relevant and successful. But, by US law, only licensed certified public accountants can provide attest services or accounting services when using the certified or chartered credential to the public. So as Melissa had mentioned, the US CPA is really what is recognized, and certainly it's the only formally recognized designation in the States. Many of our members and other international accountants seek to obtain their US CPA. So many of our members have actually found this an obstacle, as the eligibility requirements to get your US CPA includes 150 credit hours in accounting education to be eligible to sit for the CPA exams. Several international accounting bodies have multiple pathways to achieve the chartered designation, but not all of them require a 4-year degree. Almost none of them have the 150 credit hour requirements. So many of our members who try to go towards their CPA have to take on additional accounting courses to qualify for sitting for the exams. Good news is, in recent years, there's been significant amount of progress towards an expedited pathway for many of our members. These pathways are formalized through mutual recognition agreements, also called MRAs, between the International Accounting Body and the US regulators, NASBA and AICPA. The institutes with which these MRAs have been signed have been deemed to have provided substantially equivalent education, experience, and examination standards. They call it the 3 E's, substantially equivalent to those qualifying for a US CPA. In general, what this means is that a member in good standing with their institute or accounting body is eligible to sit for the International Qualification Exam, which currently is the tax and reg portion of the CPA exam. Once passed, the candidate must be licensed in the state within which they wish to practice. So some updates: as recently as 2017, CPA Canada renewed its existing MRA to include all 3 legacy designations pre-unification. Ireland renewed its MRA in November, and Australia and New Zealand is in the process of renegotiating an MRA, but its legacy institutes both already have an agreement with the US bodies. Very recently, ICAS, our Scottish member body, signed a brand new agreement with NASBA and AICPA. So these MRAs actually enable over 50% of our current ACOS membership base to obtain their US CPA on an expedited pathway. At this time, negotiations are ongoing between ICAW and SICA to come to an agreement. All parties are really motivated to finalize these respective agreements, but there are many issues to be resolved, some of which are not actually in the control of the institutes, but with the international regulatory bodies. So stay tuned for any updates on that. Just as recently as this morning, I had a message from Ken Bishop, who is the president and CEO of NASBA, who's over in the UK talking to the member bodies over there. So hopefully we'll see some movement on that front for ICAW, which would be great. If any of our audience needs more information, you can go directly to the NASBA website to find out about the MRAs in existence. And of course, you feel free to contact your accounting body for any eligibility requirements, because they are quite different amongst the different bodies. And please contact me and I can address the questions to relevant people. Happy to provide that information to our members.
Sasha, can you tell us about the immigration update webinar that you're planning for our members in the near future?
Yeah, for sure, Connell. So, this has been a great session talking about the different job trends and the skills that we need. But, one of the obstacles that many of us have being international accountants in a foreign country is really related to legally working in the US. So to address this, ACOS is holding a special session next week on September 25th to explore this topic a bit more. So Fragaman Worldwide is a legal firm who's going to be taking us through a presentation covering all these topics that you see on the screen: non-immigrant visas, H-1B, TNs, L-1s, permanent resident visas, and some other issues. We've had a lot of really great questions already submitted with regards to specific situations from people already registered, and Fragaman has been kind enough to incorporate some of those issues within their presentation. So it's going to be a very informative session. So if you haven't signed up, please make sure you do. I've got the link here, and I'll be sharing that on our LinkedIn group as well. So I think that'll be some more information to help support our members here in the States.
Speaking of links, we've included the links to a lot of interesting and useful reports, surveys, and guides, a lot of them from Robert Half, but also from some of the other institutes. So that's them on the resources page in the handout when you download the slides. I'm conscious of time, so I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Melissa, Mike, and Sasha very much for all the expertise and insights you've shared with us today. I'd really like to thank our online audience for your interest in our ACOS webinars. This is not the first, and it's not going to be the last. As Sasha mentioned, there's going to be another one soon about immigration. There's also going to be one on global tax compliance on 27th of September. And there's an ongoing series about how artificial intelligence is remaking the way we work. I think the best way, as Sasha mentioned, is to make sure you're signed up on our LinkedIn site. We have a LinkedIn group. In addition to these online sessions, we also do in-person events. So we have a lot planned. For example, in a few weeks in New York, we're going to have an in-person event to dive a little bit deeper on this topic. It'll be focusing on personal branding online for accountants. How do you do that? Digital badges. How do you do your LinkedIn profile, your online resume? And we're also organizing a rockstar panel on the business of show business in Santa Monica in a few weeks, and also planning an international accounting forum in New York next February. So exciting times ahead. Thank you very much to everyone.